Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's District Administration web seminar entitled Supporting Remote, In-Person, and Hybrid Learning Environments, which is brought to you by the generous support of our sponsors, Acer for Education and Google for Education. Before we get started, I would just like to share just a few housekeeping items with you all today before we get started. For technical support, please use the chat panel, which is on the right side of your screen. Then please select on my name, which is Stephen Blackburn, and type your message if you're having any technical issues. If you don't have computer speakers or if you prefer to listen privately, please dial the phone number and access code that I will be posting in the chat window in a few moments. Today, we will also be welcoming any questions you have with a live Q&A session at the end of the presentation. To submit a question during that time, please use the Q&A panel, which you can also find at the bottom right side of your screen, and send your questions to all panelists, which is the default option. If you don't see the chat or the Q&A panels, just look at the right side of your screen again and click the expand triangle, which is directly in front of the panel name, to make sure you have access to it. Also, one last thing to note before we get underway: if you would like to access the web seminar at a later time, everyone who is registered and who is attending today will receive an email with a link to the slide and an archive recording. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce to all of you our speakers today. First, we have Robert Cerruti, who is the Director of Technology at Madison Local School District. And we also have Ashley Medwig, who is Programs Manager at Madison Local School District as well. Hello, both of you, and thank you again for participating today and for sharing your insights.
Thanks for having us, Stephen.
Perfect. You may begin.
Okay, well, I'm a tech guy and not a presenter, so please bear with us as we go through this. Just a bit about who we are and what we do. While Ashley and I both are employees of the Madison Local School District, we are part of a shared service consortium. So Ashley and I and a team of engineers and technicians work for Madison, but we also provide technical services to a number of districts in the Northeast Ohio area we provide turnkey support. We are their whole technical department, or in some instances, we provide services such as managing their one-to-one device program or network engineering, technology planning, that sort of stuff, higher level technical skills that can be difficult to find on the market when paying school district salaries. We do this because the districts in Ohio are relatively small compared to some other states, and while they're small school districts, they have the same big district problems but without the resources. We still have networks to manage, application and file servers, support of end user devices, and we need to have a knowledge of a wide array of classroom technology. And finding a single person who can do that anymore is very challenging. When I started in this 17 years ago, there was much fewer devices to be supported and a much smaller technological footprint. Having worked with 8 school districts and a number of other educational entities has given us a bit of a different perspective than most school districts on the challenges of supporting in-person, hybrid, and full remote instruction. We have districts that we work with that are in different districts in all 3 of those. A bit of an overview in front of you of what our districts look like for size, the number of staff and buildings that we support. Our team covers districts in 4 counties, which is just under 3,000 square miles. Now, we don't cover all the districts in those counties, but those are the counties that our districts work with. As you can see from our overview, we support about 12,000 students, 1,500 staff members, and 45 buildings. Additionally, we work with other educational programs like the Juvenile Court of Lake County and a couple of independent high schools. In Ohio, we have Ohio Public Health Advisory System, which essentially rates the risk of spread of the virus in all 88 of our counties, with yellow being the least dangerous, I guess is a way you might put it, and level 4 being and purple being the most. Some of our districts have their learning, whether they're learning in person, hybrid, or remote, tied directly to the status of their county. So when the health department changes the status of a county based on their metrics, that triggers for some of our districts an automatic change in their instructional model. So in other districts, it's not automatic. It is one of the metrics that they take into account, each district takes into account in determining whether they may move from all-in to a hybrid, or from hybrid to all-in, or to virtual. One of the examples of this happening in our districts is just a few weeks ago, Lake County, which is one of our counties, moved from yellow to orange, and that automatically triggered Fairport Harbor schools to go to a hybrid environment. And our county was moved, Lake County was moved on Thursday, and on Monday we started hybrid learning. So with that sort of short-term trigger, we need to be prepared to change on within a day or so. When we speak of our the learning models that we're supporting, this is what it means to us. All in is students attending 5 days a week, all students attending. Hybrid is cohorts with some students attending on certain days and other students attending on a different day, typically to limit the number of students in the building at a time and help with social distancing. And remote is with all students learning from home. The problem with each of these is that they're not as simple as they sound. When we are hybrid, we have to determine what our students will be doing when they're not in the building. Does class continue seamlessly, as it would if everybody were in, where we just stream every day and those students who are at home log in and receive their instruction in that manner? Or is it a matter of the teacher teaches the same thing on Monday and Tuesday to one cohort and then repeats that work on Thursday, Friday to a different cohort? So two different models there and two different ways of delivering and two different sets of technology needed. Also, with our all-in, in our districts, between 20 and 30% of our students have opted for still retaining the virtual learning virtually. So 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 of our students are still at home, even in the all-in environment. And that poses its own problems of support for both our teachers and the students and the technology that will be used in those classrooms. This gives you just an idea of some of our districts and where they are right now. So we have one in every model. And as I spoke of earlier, Fairport moved to hybrid a few weeks ago, and right now Brecksville Broadview Heights is slated to go from hybrid to all-in on this coming Monday. So as we're preparing to go in one direction with one district, we are moving in another direction with a different district. So considerations for each of the models. When we talk about students being all in, we still have to determine how to handle the virtual learners. And some of the solutions that we've come up with are dedicated virtual teachers, third-party provider of curriculum, and synchronous streaming of classrooms. When we've found that the dedicated virtual teachers work for elementary level students, where you can assign a single teacher to all the third grade students who are not in person, or all the fourth grade, but it becomes much more challenging when you're speaking of an AP calculus class, where there may only be one section, one teacher who can teach it, and that teacher is teaching other courses during the day. The third-party provider of curriculum is another solution that some of our districts have gone with, but that tends to have an issue with those are not the district's teachers then teaching students. In some of our instances, the teachers are supporting students that are in that third-party provider of curriculum, but they're not the direct teacher. And then the other solution that we have used quite a bit is synchronous streaming of classrooms. So that's a student just goes through their schedule. They log in for first block or first period from their device at home, and they sit in their English class or ELA class, and then they move on to Spanish. The issue with that is you end up with 6 or 7 hours of screen time, which goes against most best practices that are recommended. When we speak about what to do with in a hybrid or issues with hybrid, you have all those same issues of the all-in for virtual learners, because we still have students who for whatever reason don't want to be in the classroom at all, even if in a hybrid environment. And to that, we add the issue of what to do with those students who are out, who are not in the building for their cohort 2 days a week. Whether we would teach them synchronously, again, just turning on but an example of turning on a streaming camera and in the classroom, and a student takes part virtually, much like a webinar that we're conducting now, or is it a matter of there is a version of a flipped classroom where for those students in the cohort that's not in the building are given videos to watch on their own pace, and then when they're in the classroom, they can ask their questions or get support. And then finally, the virtual students, as we spoke about, if you're in a complete virtual environment, is it done synchronously or asynchronously? In many of the districts we work with went with a synchronous solution when we went to our shutdown in March. Here in Ohio, we were shut down in mid-March, and we essentially conducted class from classrooms as if very little had changed. Schedules were changed a bit. Classes weren't as long, but we still handled it much the same way. A teacher started teaching at X time. Students logged in at that time. Attendance was taken at the end of that period of time. They shut the camera off, and the student went on to the next class. When we were forced into the shutdown, we set some goals and priorities for what we were doing then, and those have obviously changed now as we've realized that this isn't a short-term event. In Ohio, when we were shut down, we were told we were going to shut down for an extended spring break, 3 weeks. Of those, 2 of them were going to include instruction. In Northeast Ohio here, we are in the snow belt, so we have what are called blizzard bags, which is just schoolwork that is pre-prepared in case weather is bad and students aren't coming into class. That's essentially what happened with those 2 weeks. Was that students did a version of the blizzard bag, but as it became obvious that we were going to be out longer, there were some things that we had to take into account. We wanted to be able to provide reliable access to learning materials, which is something that we all strive to do before COVID, but it really magnified the need for that when we realized this was going to be a long-term issue. One of the other items that was really an eye-opener for us is many of our districts were already one-to-one. They had received, staff had received extensive training in LMS, whether it was Blackboard or Schoology or Google Classroom. And there was an assumption, I think, amongst administrators and the technology people that training had taken and that teachers were using those tools regularly. And we found that was not the case. Only about a third of our staff, when we started asking them questions in order to provide support for them, were using the LMS, consider themselves regular users of the LMS. So we quickly ramped up additional training for the LMS, but we also had to ramp up training for all the new technology that we purchased. So a lot of our teachers already had document cameras, but they weren't using them. They weren't used to streaming video. They weren't using microphones in their classrooms. So we thought we had all of this in place, but it wasn't as we expected. We do all of this while trying to minimize our impact from transitioning into and out of these different virtual environments. An example actually happened in our house today, in that my daughter's school district is all in, but we got a notice late last night that they couldn't provide enough substitutes for class coverage, so they switched to a virtual day with just an hour or two notice. So this is not, we now see that this is going to be an ongoing event, and that we have to prepare for it without doing damage to when we get back to, I guess, whatever normal will look like when we get through this. I'm sorry. So we have multiple districts, and they have, many of them have the same challenges. Students not having access to internet at home was one of our big. It was not widespread that there were lots of students without access, but we had. But to those students who don't have access, it is a big deal. We did purchase and deploy hotspots, but we also turned on and provided access to our access points that were on the exterior of our buildings, so students could drive up to upload or download files or homework, videos, and we were able to do that pretty quickly. Those were solutions in the spring. Now in the fall, we started getting into our testing season here, and some testing environments are allowing testing at home. Some are requiring testing on site. So we've had to work to set up testing areas within our district that still provide social distancing, that parents who are keeping their students home in a virtual environment are comfortable in bringing their students in. This has required even more technology in the way of testing devices, and in some instances, wireless access for those testing devices. Additionally, we've had a large number of substitute teachers now, and in the past, a substitute teacher for a single day may not even access a classroom LMS. But now those are longer term. As an exposure, our guidance in Ohio now is an exposure or a probable exposure means 14 days at home. So that teacher, either there will be a substitute or that teacher will have to teach from home at a moment's notice, and they need to be able to have that access. So that brings us to our ideas of deployment of devices and our strategies for those deployments. And Ashley, as our programs manager, has spearheaded nearly every aspect of that. So I'll let her take over now.
Thanks, Bob. So yeah, as Bob was saying, with the different and disparate methods of supplying curriculum to students, we had to develop a plan for each district to make sure that they are able to have devices that they need to get online, and that we can do that in a manner that makes sense with all of the unknowns that are going on right now. So we need to keep in mind how students would be learning. We want to make sure that the plan that we had matched the current, or at least where they started the year. So for virtual and hybrid students, there is an amount of flexibility required. A lot of our districts had previously issued Chromebooks to students that were stored within the building and lived in carts where they were charged overnight and ready for the next day. But when you have students who are going to and from school, such as in the hybrid environment where they're in for 2 days, out for 2 days, there's going to be a certain number of students who don't have a device at home to access either the content assigned or to log in to stream their class. So we need to make sure that they were able to get devices at home and not just in school. For students who were all in, or at least the 80% that are actually all in. We had existing carts that we could still make use of, but we needed to make some adjustments for those to make sure that the carts were spread out in a way. Previously, we had some implementations where we had perhaps a cart of 40 devices that was shared with one grade of students in a small elementary, but they weren't assigned one-to-one. With the current concerns regarding disease transmission, we wanted to be able to provide a individual device for an individual student to make sure that they weren't trading them off and on, and to make sure that they each had access to one, given the importance of technology and learning this year. We also had to take into account the devices that were available in each district. As a lot of people probably experienced, devices were very hard to come by for districts who weren't already at a one-to-one device-to-student ratio. So while some of our districts had planned ahead or were already at a one-to-one status, there was a couple of our districts who did not have one device per student and either had to wait on back orders to come in or make decisions regarding the best use of the devices that they already had. In some of those districts, for example, where we did not have a device for every student, we were fortunate that many of the virtual learners did have technology at home, but we were able to supply devices on an as-needed basis to ones that didn't, but offering them only on an as-needed basis did reduce the number of devices that we needed to distribute. We also kept in mind, I think we might have flipped too early. Yeah, so we also wanted to keep in mind what next year, the next semester is going to look like when we made any changes to current deployments. While a lot of our districts were planning to move to one-to-one, if not there already, as I mentioned, some just did not have the devices to accommodate that kind of rollout and did not have plans to acquire them. So for those, we have to keep in mind what the changes we made this year, what implications they'll have for the next fall. One way we were able to mitigate some of that was for virtual learners, they use the devices that were slated to be removed from carts next year. Google has an end-of-life policy for all Chromebooks. If anyone's not familiar with that, they are only guaranteed to receive updates for a certain period after they are released. So we had a good number of devices that we were going to be removing from carts anyway this summer. So we used those for our virtual learners, and that put us ahead for that project where we were getting them out of carts. And they're also less loss if they're not returned. While we do sometimes keep them around as spare devices, they are not going to be our primary devices next year. And this is just a little bit of a graphic similar to the one for our learning model statuses that we had. This shows kind of where our schools were at the beginning of the year, or last year, I should say, and where they currently have moved to. The three levels, the one at the bottom is districts who were not one-to-one last year. In the middle, we have districts or buildings who were one-to-one, had a device for every student, but they hadn't planned on issuing devices to go home with students. And at the top, in that teal color, are districts or buildings that had issued devices to go home with each individual student. As we planned this summer, after we were let out unexpectedly in March, we had to modify some of the plans that we had made. So you can see the arrows showed where each district moved to in that status. But for example, Brookfield, grades 3 to 8, they had planned on having their students have devices assigned one-to-one, but they were not going to be taking them home. But since that district was one that was hybrid, they ended up altering their plan to assign devices to students individually and just have them start that process of taking them home on a daily basis, just in case there was any change. And also because they're hybrid students, many of them did not have access to a device at home, so it made more sense to apply that policy building-wide. So when we are doing as much as we are with technology, we want to make sure that we can support our staff and our students in the best way that we can. First of all, device troubleshooting. Things happen, devices break. I know we had at least a couple of chargers that dogs have gotten to this year, and we all know that Chromebook screens are particularly fragile if not handled carefully. But we did have the challenge of how we were going to provide that troubleshooting or repairs to students who are in our different learning models. For buildings that are fully remote, where the students aren't coming into the building, we have scheduled weekly tech hours so that families could bring in devices for repair or troubleshooting of problems they're having. It's challenging when the students aren't in the building and you can't just walk down the hall and look at their device. So having those hours scheduled gave us the opportunity to fix those devices in person in a planned manner and in a streamlined manner, so we could make the most use of those hours we scheduled, as opposed to scheduling individual appointment blocks. For hybrid and all-in students, where students are still coming into the building, we have instituted building tech liaisons, and these are usually teachers or secretaries. They're not necessarily technically savvy people, but they are people who are provided a cart of spare devices and loaner devices. So if a student breaks their device or has an issue that prevents them from using it that day, they're able to walk down the hall and hand it to a person in the building, and they're issued an immediate replacement so that they can go right back to class without having their lessons interrupted. That's a model that we had in place already in some districts, but given the amount of devices issued and the constant need for the ability to sign in, we wanted to put that in place everywhere so that all of our buildings had this ability to get devices in students' hands to minimize the impact on their learning if theirs were to stop functioning. We also wanted to make sure our staff were prepared. A lot of them, as Bob said, while we've had PD in the past, it might not have taken, or they might not have utilized it in the same capacity that they're using right now. So we wanted to make sure we got them on the same page so that they could confidently and effectively deliver that instruction using the technology we provided to them. So depending on the district, that could include getting used to their video streaming platforms so that they know how to add students, connect with students, prevent unwanted people from joining their videos and Zoom bombing them, making sure that they were able to post onto their learning management system so that students could access coursework, and also utilize the technology that we provided them newly this year. We've had a lot of teachers in the past who had document cameras and sometimes microphones, but when they were using them in a much different context than they currently are. So we wanted to make sure our teachers were comfortable using that, knowing what to expect when they're connecting to students, knowing that they can effectively show them the classwork with a document camera, and how to just do simple streamlined things like moving between monitors, presenting their screen, and using those tools to get that technology to their students. We also provided some troubleshooting resources at the beginning of the shutdown that we have kept. A lot of the problems that students and teachers have with Chromebooks and online learning aren't unique. So we compiled some resources and instructions for the most common things. Oftentimes, updating your operating system on your Chromebook, clearing browser data, or enabling Flash to get a video on a website to work, are things that can be done by a user within just a couple of minutes, and are things that happen to a lot of people. So we were able to put together some resources so that they could sometimes help themselves with those things. There's always going to be users who still need assistance, but it helps us get to those users faster when we enable people to help themselves diagnose their technology problems.
Actually, if I could, I want to expand a little bit on our tech office hours and our building tech liaisons. The tech office hours were just a published few hours where we would assign a technician, 2 technicians, 3 technicians, depending on the size of the building. And there was no appointment necessary. Everybody knew when those hours were, and you just showed up and were serviced. And our technicians were supplied with spare or loaner Chromebooks as well. So a student never left without a working Chromebook. If it was something that could not be repaired in the tech office hours, we supplied a spare so that the student left with a working device. And then in our building tech liaisons, the same thing in that they would supply a spare or loaner device because they weren't necessarily equipped to do the repairs themselves. But when they entered into our log the damage or the issue with a Chromebook, our team was alerted immediately, and we would dispatch on a regular basis technicians to do those repairs or make those changes. One of the other things in the troubleshooting resources we supplied, one of the big problems that Ashley didn't speak of that we had was students just not knowing how to log into the different platforms. And we have worked in all of our districts to differing levels of success to standardize our username and password convention in a formulaic method so that it is easy for teachers to help students or for parents to know a username or password for their student. And we included that information, how the formulas worked for our students, but not the actual information that created the formulas.
Yeah, that's a great point. If a student can't log in, then they can't do much beyond that. So we did want to make sure that they had that access and that their parents knew how to access it as well. There's plenty of students who are used to doing it and have been in the district for a long time, but oftentimes younger ones have the assistance of a teacher that they certainly don't have when they're at home. So one priority we had was maintaining continuity in school. With this year and all of the unknowns, we kind of had to expect the unexpected, and we addressed that in a few ways, one of which was our device deployment strategies. Wherever it was possible, reasonable, and we had the devices to do it, we assigned devices on a one-to-one basis to be taken home each day. While a lot of our schools had previously used carts, as I had mentioned, so that they stayed in the schools, we kind of had to be prepared for schools to close or for plans to change at any moment. For the district Bob mentioned earlier, Fairport Harbor, that went from all-in 5-day-a-week classes in person to hybrid over the span of a day, we didn't have to take any intervention to make that happen. Since their students were already assigned devices and were used to taking them home, they just continued as usual and signed in from home on the hybrid days instead of coming in. But they were perfectly prepared to do that already. The equipment I mentioned earlier, we made sure that our teachers had access as needed to different technology for their classrooms, including but not limited to cameras for streaming so that their students could see them teach, microphones so that their students who aren't in the classroom could hear them, especially important in the synchronous models where students were just logging into a class where the teacher was in a classroom with students on campus. If the student or if the teacher isn't tailoring their class to online students and is teaching kind of as usual, it's important that the students who aren't there are able to see and hear them so that they aren't missing out, since the teacher doesn't really have the capacity to focus on them individually all of the time. We also made sure that some teachers had document cameras so that students who weren't in the classroom could see representation of what they were doing in person. We leaned harder this year on LMSs than we have in previous years. While a couple of our districts use Blackboard or Schoology pretty regularly, and many of our teachers were utilizing Google Classroom, we made sure to streamline each district so that everyone was unified and using the same LMS. With that implemented and teachers posting all of the curriculum in one place, students and families could access instruction anywhere. And it was also, well, as I mentioned in the next bullet, we wanted to make sure it was consistent so that students were always going to the same place. We had some parent surveys from various districts last year when we went to remote learning very suddenly as a result of the COVID outbreak. And one of the comments that I saw a lot was that parents had a hard time keeping track of the different resources teachers were using to deliver content. And especially when they're not used to most of these systems themselves, it made it much easier for families to be able to always check one place like Google Classroom or Schoology to make sure that they could keep their students on track. It's also easier for teachers as far as giving PD and supporting each other. They're able to learn the platform more easily when there's just one to learn. And it's also easier for our tech to troubleshoot. Say if there's an outage for Google, if Hangouts or Meet is down, we know that that's going to apply to everyone across the board. Or if there's an issue with Classroom where assignments aren't attaching correctly, we're able to better learn those intricacies of the individual platforms and provide solutions more effectively. Our Chromebooks are also outfitted with the Securely Chrome extension. Most internet filtering providers these days have browser-based extensions. Securely is just the one that we use in most of our districts. And that's in effect anywhere the device is used. So if there is a situation where students are all in one day and have to switch to virtual learning the next, their devices are still going to be filtered and the students prevented from accessing explicit materials. While we've had a lot of struggles and challenges in getting all of these changes to our device deployments and technology in place, there have been some really good silver linings. For some schools who had planned to implement one-to-one rollout, they were able to do so ahead of schedule or modify their plans so that instead of students having a device in a cart, they now have a device that they can take home. That gives students who might not have a device at home the ability to access their assignments and do homework at the same capacity as their other peers who do have computers at home. And teachers can count on, in those cases, students always having access to a device instead of situations where maybe they were sharing a cart between two classes. They always know that they are always able to get online for whatever activity or lesson they had planned. It also gave us a chance to refine and streamline processes we had in place, and that's both for tech and instruction. For troubleshooting and repairs, the tech liaison system with loaners and the ability for students to immediately be issued a spare device, whereas previously teachers would have to submit a request, which took time out of their day and took time for us to go to the building and either issue a spare or repair the device. Now students have instant access to a spare so that they aren't missing any coursework. And it also makes it easier for teachers because they don't have to submit a tech request and fill out a whole form for a ticket. There's a designated person in the building that all of that goes through. And instruction, a lot of teachers were already using Google Classroom, but it has been really awesome to see the digital literacy increase amongst teachers. A lot of teachers were hesitant, especially in a couple of extracurriculars. I've definitely spoken to art teachers, for example, who have said, I don't know about this whole Google Classroom thing. I'm not really a tech teacher. I don't understand how my curriculum could ever be brought online. And while in all of those cases and in all subjects, it's important to have personal interactions and do things away from screen time, I've seen some teachers really jump into it and do pretty neat things like virtual field trips to art museums or the Smithsonian or ancient ruins, and try out things and get their class involved in ways that I don't think that they would have been willing to try before. And that's been rewarding, and I think will change how they teach going forward. It's also changed our mindset of how we can provide instructions to students who aren't in school, whether that's due to illness, vacation days, or snow days. In the past, we've had blizzard bags, like Bob mentioned, which were meant to keep students engaged while they weren't in school, but with the ability to create curriculum and post it in real time, I think teachers are going to be much more able to accommodate students who can't make it to class, whether that is all of them or whether they're out for an illness for a week. You won't have to go to the school like you had in the past to pick up copies of papers. The teacher will have direct ability to access them and give them assignments or collect their assignments in real time.
One of the interesting things for us is we did our first one-to-one deployment 7 years ago, just about now, 7 years ago, and those teachers were teaching with devices. Their students had devices every day. They were taking them home every day from the middle school through high school. And the elementary had a device assigned to every student that stayed in the building. And what's interesting is, even 7 years later, those teachers were not what I would consider even close to 100% of teaching online or teaching using these digital tools. And this has kind of forced the hand of even those who've been at it for 7 years. It gives us a chance to embrace what has been talked about of this sort of digital revolution that's been spoken of, the chance to flip classrooms, the chance to teach differently. It's been a fairly challenging and not a very happy time for the last 7 months for our technology team and for the teachers, I'm sure, throughout the country and technology staff. But I think in the end, this is going to prove to be very valuable as we move forward with marrying technology to instruction.
As Bob had said, too, in the past, he's mentioned that flipping your classroom doesn't just mean that now your textbooks and your tests are online. It means getting your students involved in ways they wouldn't have been able to before. And teachers who have really latched onto that, and they're doing all these cool activities like escape rooms or scavenger hunts where their students are given the ability to explore and learn and problem solve on their own. It's really nice to see, and it's been really great to see teachers collaborating on that too. It's not just one teacher who's jumping in. It's maybe the whole 7th grade history team is doing an activity that makes sure all the students are involved and engaged and still working in teams even though they're not seeing each other in person.
Perfect. Well, thank you both of you for your time and your expertise on this. We all really do appreciate it. Just really quick, before we start the Q&A portion, I just wanted to let you know that we just launched a poll that we would encourage everyone to participate in. So feel free to utilize this time by answering the poll during the Q&A. And with that, like I said, now is the time for Q&A, where Robert and Ashley, they will be answering any questions that you may have. So for those of you who have not yet submitted a question, you can do so now by submitting your question in the Q&A panel, which should be located below the chat panel at the bottom of your screen. And so it looks like we have quite a few questions that came in, which is good. First off, we can start with one that came in about special education and ELL. So they're asking, are your special education and English language learners logging in with their LMS or learning management system? What is their rate of engagement?
So that is actually one of the points that or one of the things that we have done, even in our virtual, in a school district that is completely remote, as well as in our hybrid learning environments where students come in on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday and Friday, we are having special education and other, which would include English language learners, come in for in-person, small group, or individual instruction or coaching, tutoring on those days. We do have them in those very early days. We worked with just getting them logged in so they understood where to find assignments, how to submit assignments. Then we moved into more traditional instruction on those small group days. So that is one more thing when we say all in, it's not all in because there's 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 of our students are still virtual. And when we say all out, it's not really all out. We still have students who come in small groups who have that need on specific days. And the all out days, it's spread out over a few days during the week. For the hybrid learners, they come in on Wednesdays, but they also are in during their cohort either Monday and Tuesday or Thursday and Friday.
Perfect. Thank you. Ashley, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think Bob covered it.
Perfect. So another question that came in, someone asked, what have you done for students, who just newly enrolled and have never been in school for the first grading period, the school year? So for example, what intervention strategies have been put in place in one of these instances?
So we have had virtual open houses with specific students and their parents invited. We also do have that overlaps some. We do have days for students to come in, and in those small groups that would include students who are new to the district on a opt-in basis. We don't. To the best of my knowledge, we have not required students to come in who are newly enrolled, but if they would like to, they're given that option in our hybrid and our remote districts.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that. Another question, someone was asking about parent PD. So for example, did you create parent professional development to best support the learning of their child for the streaming platforms and your LMS?
So I'm guessing that Ashley will let me speak on this one too, but she'll have something to add, I think. This is the resources we brought together were all placed on a website. We did not do a specific work with a planned professional development or for parents, but we brought together a support website that included information on the platforms that the students would be using, including the LMS, but not only the LMS, including different curriculum and instruction platforms, and as well as troubleshooting for common issues. But we did not provide a specific PD to parents, although that seems like something that we could or would do. Ashley, do you have anything to add to that? You were part of the building out of the website.
Yeah, so on the website, we did provide quick links to a couple things like Google Classroom and some of the more commonly used resources they're expected to access. Aside from that, we also pushed those things to the Chromebooks. For example, if a district is using Zoom, we would force install Zoom, Google Classroom, and make sure that they are pinned so that they are always sitting on the bottom shelf of the Chromebook. So once a student logs in, they don't really have to know much about how to access them. They're able to just click in and they don't have to worry about installing them or acquiring that software. We also kind of do some, educating of our educators. All of our teachers know the usual formats of the logins for students so that all of them are able to help a student sign in, as do our secretaries and administrators. So it doesn't really matter who a student goes to. If they need to ask for help, it doesn't have to be us. They're able to facilitate getting them into their accounts.
Thank you. Thank you for that, both of you. We have another question for one of our audience members. So they're asking, how exactly does one teacher teach the students who are at home and in the classroom at once? So, for example, how is the tech set up for a teacher to accomplish this?
So we have our classrooms has a streaming web camera and tripod that is connected to the teacher's workstation, whether that's a laptop or desktop, depends on the district or the classroom. And then either, depending on what the district chose to do, that camera has an integrated microphone, a conference microphone, so that it's unidirectional. It can pick up voices from anywhere in the classroom. Or if a district has chosen, we purchased wireless mics for the teacher to wear that would then transmit to their workstation so that students could hear them wherever they were in the classroom. The teacher launches their camera in whatever video platform our districts currently use, either Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, or Zoom as the platform. Different districts have selected one and standardized, but those are the three that we are supporting. They then share their desktop of whatever content that they have on their desktop. But at the same time, on all three of those platforms, you have the end user has the ability to choose whether they see a split screen or a large view of the desktop that the teacher is sharing, which would also be what is traditionally on either a Promethean board or some sort of interactive display smart board, but can also see the classroom. So that's how the technology is roughly set up within our classrooms that are synchronously teaching, where they start the class and they start the video at the same time.
Yeah, and we've also helped them use that technology. Some teachers are already used to teaching with a document camera, so they might have a worksheet that they're projecting on their classroom projector, but in the past, they've been able to walk up to the front of their room and use their smart board or other digital boards where they can pick up a marker, draw on the screen. When you don't have the students in the room with you, that can be challenging. So we've been helping our teachers use other tools like annotation from their computer so that they can highlight, underline, illustrate things, and all of their students can see it, not just the ones that are standing in the classroom, and helping them navigate the use of multiple monitors and screens when they're sharing with their students to make sure that all of their students are able to see what they're teaching, regardless of whether they are in the room or sitting at home and signing in.
Thank you. Thank you for that, both of you, again. So another question is in regards to a comment that one of you made earlier, how there's about 2 or 3 technicians per building. So they were wondering, how many students do these personnel members service?
So the 2 to 3 technicians per building was for our tech office hours. So if we had a building of, say, 1,000 students, we would likely have 3 technicians there for 3 hours in a single day to process whatever repairs or questions might have. We generally didn't set the number of technicians for a tech office hours, as we called them, based on the size of the building, but based on the log of the previous week. If we felt we were a bit underutilized, we would subtract a technician and use them somewhere else. If we felt that we weren't getting to the issues quick enough, we would add another technician for the next tech office hours. So the 2 to 3 technicians is really just a matter of being able to get to see everybody in that 3-hour or 2-hour or 4-hour window, depending on how long the tech office hours were that we assigned.
Perfect. Thanks again. So we have another question as well. This one's about online appropriate use policies. So that this attendee was wondering if your team was responsible for, creating one of these policies, online appropriate use. not just for devices that went home for remote learning, for example, but essentially also for online student and teacher behavior during school hours? And if so, how did you manage that?
So we were a part of the acceptable use for students both at home and in the district. We have also, in some districts, they've implemented digital citizenship requirements that we helped write, usually written right into the student handbook. So as Ashley spoke about, we use Securely as a filtering and security software on both our network and our end user devices. So we are able to keep a pretty good eye on what is going on and set alerts if there are issues to be addressed. Not all issues with students getting to, or very rarely actually, are issues of students getting to websites a technical problem. We can alert administrators and teachers to what's happening, and we can certainly block sites or applications. But in the end, it comes down to being a classroom management sort of thing for administrators and teachers to manage once the rules are set, and we're able to act more like a monitor than an enforcer.
Perfect. Thank you again. So it looks like those were all the questions that we had. So before signing out, I just want to say to both of you, Robert and Ashley, again, thank you for your insights. We really appreciate your time here today and sharing your experience at your district. And our audience appreciates it as well, for sure. And I would also like to thank our audience members for joining us today as well. For those of you who enjoyed our presentation today, there are many more upcoming web seminars like this one that are provided by District Administration, which is a leader in editorial coverage of news as well as trends, in addition to current issues in K through 12. Our wide range of readers subscribe to District Administration for free, and all of them stay up to date with us through our print magazine, as well as the digital edition of our magazine, our e-newsletters, as well as web seminars like this one. Also, for those of you who would like to watch this web seminar again, or maybe some of you believe that the solutions provided today would be useful to some of your colleagues, well, you would be pleased to know that an archive recording of this web seminar will be available at the URL, which you can see on your screen right here. You can also expect to receive an email from our team at some point tomorrow over here at DA, which will include a link to all of our slides. And so with that, on behalf of District Administration, this is Stephen Blackburn. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your school year, and please, all of you, be safe. Thank you very much, and take care.